I mean, first and foremost, I'd say if you're questioning at all, it's always good to go bounce ideas off of a healthcare provider, whether it be your family doctor, whether you're working with a naturopathic doctor. And in fact, I would recommend having both on your healthcare team. And if it requires as well, also a gynecologist, also an OB. It's nice to have more people looking at your health, more education. Everybody brings something different to the table.
I'm Erica.
And I'm CJ.
And you're listening to the Her Podcast. We are thrilled about today's episode because we've got Dr. Brittany Pearce joining us. Dr. Brittany is a licensed naturopathic doctor based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, with nearly 10 years of education, including a registered holistic nutrition designation, a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology, and a degree in naturopathic medicine from the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine. In this episode, we chat about how you can understand and balance your hormones effectively, recognizing the signs of unbalanced hormones and their impact on your health, practical tips for incorporating hormone balancing strategies into your busy life, and simple changes or swaps you can make to support hormone balance and overall well-being. You're in for an inspiring discussion that will empower you to take charge of your own health. On that note, let's welcome Dr. Brittany Pearce to the Her Podcast.
Yeah.
So your drive out here was good. Did you have a good day so far?
Yeah, it was good. I was just saying I took the day off of work and I went to the gym, did some self-care, and made my way out here. It was kind of nice to have that hour. Played some music, sang a little bit.
Oh, there you from? What side of the city are you on?
Newtana area.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So, yeah, it would have taken you about an hour.
Yeah.
I don't mind the drive. I mean, I'm biased because I obviously live here.
Yeah.
But I am like, I don't think it's that bad. I think it's okay.
No, I think it's like once you live outside the city, you're just so used to everything being about an hour to go anywhere. But it's the people who live inside the city are just like, what do you mean it's more than 10 minutes?
I was going to say exactly that. 10 minutes, yeah.
Like I remember growing up, I grew up in Calgary.
Yeah.
But my parents would not go anywhere outside of like our community. It was like the 10-minute rule. Like, you know, like Chinook Mall is like central Calgary. Yeah. And to like go there was like once a year. Yeah. You would drive that 20 minutes to like get to Chinook Mall. The big mall. Yeah. It was just like, nope, that's not happening. And then now living outside the city, it's just like, it's what you do.
Yeah, it's just what you do. I noticed like since living in the city, again, I grew up in Dalmany, even things like groceries, you really had to plan like you got something for the next week or 2 weeks maybe, and that's what you were eating. Whereas now, I find I'm quite lazy with groceries. I'll go get stuff and I'm like, I can come back on Wednesday and pick up a few more things. Literally. So I've definitely gotten used to the luxuries of living in the city, but...
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm so excited to sit down today because our audience is primarily female and super interested. Obviously, we're interested. Our audience is interested in just like women's health and hormones. And it's just like all these things that we talk about. And obviously, we have guests that come on and share sort of their experience. Yes. But to have someone that actually has some educational background is so exciting. So we have so many questions for you today. But I think when I was thinking about this episode, one of the biggest things is we talk about lately, I feel like people being like, balance your hormones and female hormones. Yes. And so it's like, I have a couple thoughts. Like one, it's like, what even, you know, when I hear that, most of us are probably like, what? Okay, I need to balance my hormones. What does that even mean?
Like, what am I balancing?
You know what I mean? Yes. So, like, I think we, like, understand. So, I'm hoping today that we can get into, like, yes, some of the detail, but, like, make it palatable to be like, how is this actually impacting us? Like, what are we looking for? So, even maybe starting off when we talk about unbalanced hormones, like, what are common symptoms or, like, things that our listeners and us are maybe experiencing that we can be like, oh, this could be unbalanced hormones, and then get into what even are balanced hormones.
Yeah. I think it might be helpful to just start with going over the menstrual cycle. And I know that that can kind of seem a little bit rudimentary, but when we talk about balanced hormones, I don't think, and again, depending on who's talking about, for myself anyways, if I were to say that in practice, I'm not necessarily meaning that I want all hormones to be exactly the same. It means, I think saying optimizing hormones is probably a better way of talking about it, as opposed to balancing. Yeah, because we're trying to optimize the levels as to where they should be throughout the menstrual cycle. And each hormone has its different time to shine during the menstrual cycle as well. So if we look at a menstrual cycle, so typically it's about 28 days. It can swing anywhere from 26 to about 34 days. That's considered normal. So again, we have usually 2 phases of the cycle. We have the follicle stimulating phase and we have the luteal phase. In the first half of the cycle, so we have FSH and LH. So again, from there in the brain, we have the hypothalamus. So it secretes something called gonadotropin releasing hormone. And it goes to the pituitary and tells the pituitary, hey, could you make some follicle stimulating hormone and some luteinizing hormone? Those then go to the ovaries and stimulate the ovaries to mature a follicle, which has the egg in it, which is released during ovulation. And then once FSH goes to the ovaries and stimulates the follicle, it also stimulates estrogen secretion. And so estrogen is what is more, available or more predominates during the first half of the cycle.
Well, I feel like lots of us hear about estrogen. Like FSH,
Yes.
not so much. LH, not so much.
Yes.
You know, I'm like, we're usually hearing about estrogen.
You're using words. I'm like,
What?
So I tend to go really deep into things. So tell me if something doesn't make sense or you have questions, let me know. But I tend to just dive into it because I like
basically
to know all
what
the
I
things.
learned from this is something in my brain
Yeah.
tells something else
In the ovaries.
in the ovaries
To make
Time
some
to make
estrogen.
a follicle.
Time to make an egg.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's time to make an egg,
And
time
then-
to make some estrogen.
Is it okay? And-
Yes.
Okay.
So the 2 are important. So during the first half, we're looking at, stimulating the follicle to start to mature in order to release the egg halfway. Estrogen is also stimulated because we're trying to build the uterine lining so that when the egg is released, it can implant. So this is what's happening in the first half of the cycle. Progesterone doesn't even come out yet, really.
Yeah, that's the other
It's
one we
more
hear
so
about.
just estrogen.
Okay.
And so estrogen starts to rise over the first half. And as estrogen rises, once it hits past day 10, then luteinizing hormone comes out and it's the LH surge. So some people, if they've gone through trying to become pregnant and they're tracking their cycles, it's that LH surge midway that we're looking to see if you ovulate.
Oh, okay. So LH is correlated with ovulation.
So that is the
And
LH
it's a
peak that we
surge.
ovulate. It's a surge.
Okay.
So this is then when, after we ovulate and the egg is released and it goes into the uterus, if there's, of course, sperm around, we get fertilization and it is then implanted into the uterine lining and we can go along with pregnancy. If there's no sperm and it's not fertilized, then we get a breakdown of the egg and a breakdown of the uterine lining and we get our period. And so during the second half of the cycle, we actually want more progesterone around. And so after the follicle is released, what's left behind is called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum makes progesterone, and that, again, is what is more available during the second half. It helps to maintain the uterine lining along with estrogen. But again, we want more progesterone during the second half.
So what are we feeling if we have, okay. Again, I'm taking
Yeah.
away and maybe
Ask all
I'm
the
cutting
questions.
out the other ones that we're not supposed to be cutting out
Yeah.
and we can circle back to them. But
Yeah.
I'm like, estrogen and progesterone are higher
Yeah.
at different periods.
Yes.
And I'm like, obviously, if they're backwards or mixed or whatever, I'm sure that you have things that are wrong.
Yeah. You start
Or
to get
like,
some
symptoms,
symptoms. Yeah.
right? So I'm wondering what are some symptoms or some things you can experience if the estrogen is not correct,
Yes.
doing what it's supposed to, and or if the progesterone is not correct.
Right. So a term you'll often hear thrown around is called estrogen dominance.
Yeah.
Yes. And so this is typically referring to when we have higher levels of estrogen. Now, it could mean 2 things. It could be estrogen. If you were to run labs, estrogen is actually out of range. And it could mean that estrogen is within range, but in comparison to progesterone is, again, much higher.
Okay.
So again, estrogen being at the top end of the range and progesterone being at the bottom end of the normal limit.
Yeah.
So with estrogen dominance or higher levels of estrogen, we typically see symptoms like heavy periods, really short cycles, so something around day 21 or earlier. And again, if we think about what estrogen is doing in the body, the higher the level that estrogen gets in that first half of the cycle, that's what brings on the LH secretion, that's what brings on ovulation. So if we have higher levels of estrogen earlier on, that will stimulate ovulation to happen earlier on, and we'll have more frequent cycles. So again, like some women are having cycles every 2 weeks because of this.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a little much.
Yeah.
And so that tells me that, okay, there's a chance we're looking at higher levels of estrogen here. Other symptoms.
Question then.
Yes.
I'm going to take a side tangent because
Yeah.
we actually had a listener ask about this. So heavy periods,
Yeah.
which you just associated with estrogen,
Yes.
is the only, so if someone is experiencing high estrogen or heavy periods and they're not wanting to use birth control
Yes.
to manage it,
Yes.
are there other options?
There's lots of options, and this is
Okay.
where we would need to look at. So again, there's, for heavy periods, yes,
Yeah.
it could be high levels of estrogen. Usually estrogen is involved to a certain extent, but it also could be endometriosis. It could be PCOS. It could be uterine fibroids. So depending on how heavy and other symptoms coming along with it will govern whether or not I send them for more labs, more testing, more imaging.
Okay.
So yes, is there other ways to manage it? Yes, absolutely.
Can we pretend for a second that this person just has a heavy period and doesn't have any of those
and
things?
those other things?
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Pretend her name is Jessica and she has a heavy flow.
but we know there's no fibroids, no endometriosis, no
we
PCOS.
already know. She's just got a heavy flow.
Yeah. So things that you can do. I mean, if somebody were to come into me, and this would be the situation, we'd look at ways to optimize estrogen levels. So I'm looking at, okay, and this is where it gets, there's many different aspects of this, and we might dive into more of it later, but I'm looking at, okay, are you, and I hate to use the word detox, but whether it be a hormone, whether it be an environmental chemical, we all have to detox it through the body in order to actually get rid of it. So let's take estrogen, for example. When the body is done utilizing it, it sends it to the liver. And the liver, it's going to go through 2 different phases in order to be metabolized in a way or packaged in a way so that we can actually get rid of it. So it's going to go from the liver, then it's dumped into something called bile, which we know kind of to do with the gallbladder, breaks down fat. So it's thrown into bile, from bile into the small intestine, and then you have a bowel movement, and that's how you get rid of it. So I'm going to make sure that that whole process is happening optimally. So when we look at the 2 different phases in the liver in order to metabolize, or like I said, package estrogen, phase 1 has to do with more of your B vitamins, and phase 2, a huge chunk of it is your amino acids, so enough protein. So I'm looking at, okay, does the diet have enough B vitamins, and are you eating enough protein? And I'm going to go ahead and say that 95% of my female patients are not eating enough protein.
Unless they're CJ.
Unless you're CJ, are you good with your protein?
Like 140 grams.
Dang, girl.
Yeah,
Good.
it's
So
like
your liver detox is on point.
Okay, but that is not normal, and that
It's
is something
not.
that I have started doing.
Yes.
And we've talked about protein on here a lot.
Exactly.
Yes.
So upping
Where
the
do you get
protein.
B vitamins from, though?
Could be anything from leafy greens, complex carbohydrates, meat. So if you're vegetarian, that's something like B12. I think most vegetarians know that B12 is something that's hard to get in if you're not having meat. So then we got to make sure that your B12 levels are good, or eating more foods high in B12 in order to compensate, or sometimes even supplement. But then after the liver, when we hit the digestive tract, I want to make sure that things are actually moving on and out efficiently. So if you're a person that, every 3 days a bowel movement is your norm, I'm going to want to speed that up. I'd like to see it every day. I want that stuff moving on and out because it can actually be reabsorbed the longer it sits there.
Okay, which, we need to talk about this because we
talk
know
about poop a lot on the podcast.
Well,
surprisingly.
so many women struggle
Yes.
with pooping regularly.
Yes.
So I'm like, please
hormones
go
can affect
into
it too.
this.
Yeah.
How do we have more regular
Go on
bowel
the regular.
movements and make sure
Yeah.
that it's going through and not
Yes.
getting reabsorbed?
So
Help us.
So again, that is what I'm here for.
Help me poop.
So yeah, the longer it sits there, the more it will be reabsorbed, or the more chance it has to be reabsorbed.
Pause, because that is the part that's freaking me out right now. I've been fine being constipated. Okay, I've been fine living in a state of uncomfortableness.
Now you're
my
telling
body
me?
is going against me and reabsorbing me. Why?
Yes. Well,
What is this crap?
And it's not even just hormones,
Literal.
like cholesterol, literally crap.
Good joke.
Cholesterol also, and now again, that's outside of hormones, but cholesterol also can be reabsorbed. So if I have somebody who comes in with high cholesterol, I'm looking at how often they're having a bowel movement, because that also will be reabsorbed the longer it sits there.
What? Say that one more time.
Cholesterol levels can go up because they can. That's how we get rid of cholesterol, is through a bowel movement. But the longer that the bowel, the stool sits within the
You get
digestive
higher
tract,
cholesterol.
can get reabsorbed and drive levels up too.
Okay.
That's crazy.
So outside of how long it sits in the digestive tract, does the term microbiome mean anything?
Yes.
So again, bacteria in the gut.
Yeah.
We have good bacteria, we have bad bacteria. So microbiome, but then there's a subsection referred to in research as the estrobolome. So that's because those bacteria can actually reactivate estrogen. So it's reabsorbed and returned to circulation. And so, and this has something to do with, it's called beta-glucuronidase. It's an enzyme that reactivates estrogen. And so you can have too much activity of that enzyme, making it so that too much estrogen is reabsorbed. And that drives, again, either kind of things like estrogen dominance. Potentially, they're looking at the roles it plays in endometriosis development, PCOS, uterine fibroids, things like that. So we want to make sure we have a healthy microbiome, in addition to that we're actually eliminating regularly.
Okay, so what are some tips? Like, not too, deep, but, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Obviously,
bowel movements.
things I know are, to be hydrated,
absolutely.
right? I think that probably...
What is hydrate? What do you think? How many cups? What are you thinking for hydration? Or how many liters?
I'm bad at understanding liters.
Yeah.
I have, a Stanley that is, one of the big ones.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I probably
40
drink...
ounces.
Yeah.
Okay, which is how many liters?
So I would.
I drink a lot of water. I know I'm eating it, but I don't know what
how
it
many
is.
of those Stanleys do you have a day?
1.5 to 2.
Okay, so I would say, and again, I'd have to go check again my ounces to liters, but I think that you need to be somewhere around 2 to 3.
Oh, did badang.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, when we're talking about hydration, I think we have 8 cups often in our mind, but I think it's actually closer to the 11 cups for most women. Now again, height and weight and activity. Let's get our water. Let's all have a sip of water. Get it in.
Okay, but my problem is, and maybe this is a side tangent that we should not take, is then I have to pee 9,000, which I already do.
Oh, peeing is so inconvenient.
So your
Do you know what
body
I mean?
will adjust. So if you
It's
go
not
from doing like
adjusting.
if you go from doing 1 cup to 11 cups, it's not going to go great for you.
Yeah.
But increasing it slowly over time.
Okay.
Is the
So would you even suggest that if you're like, I'm going to, because I think this is something we get caught up in, is we're like, we need to drink more water. Okay, I need to drink 3 Stanleys worth. Well, right now I'm drinking half of my Stanley. Would you say, yo, let's start with a full Stanley a day?
Absolutely.
And like, let's not overload your body to the point that, because I feel like that could also cause problems if all of a sudden you're peeing so much or your body's like, whoa, this is like a large amount of water that I'm not.
Yeah.
That I'm like not used to. Plus, can't like water wreck your salt levels? Like too much water.
Yeah. So you're gonna want to increase slowly.
That's why I'm not drinking water. Don't want to wreck my salt levels.
Just kidding. And again, being careful too, because I think it's pretty trendy in social media right now to use electrolytes.
Yeah.
Really, we don't need those unless you're sweating a bunch.
Really?
Now, I'm guilty of using electrolytes because, again, if you have one that tastes good.
I like the lemony ones from Costco.
Yeah.
They're so yummy.
And it makes it easier to get the water in.
Yes.
I would say, be careful with that, and definitely don't be doing, like, they come in little packets or scoops or whatever. Don't be doing that every day, all day. Like one serving. Yeah.
And
even then.
more so, like, so I work out.
Yeah.
So it's like, have it when you're working out or after you work out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
so,
tip.
Hydration.
Okay.
So you already knew that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So pooping. We need to be hydrated.
You got to be hydrated.
What are some other things?
So fiber. I mean, I think that's another obvious one too. And again, just like the water, not go 0 to 100 because that will probably make the constipation worse. So typically they suggest around 30 grams a day. So starting with that, trying to work towards it. Basically what I do is when I send my patients home, I'm like, get a sense of where you're at, whether it be protein, water, or fiber. And then take that and try and increase it from there a little bit each day and over the next month.
What are some easy ways to get fiber?
So again, depending on kind of what their diet looks like, I'll go about it different ways. But if you have a smoothie in the morning, throwing some flax seeds or chia seeds in it.
Riddle me this.
Yes. Tell me.
I heard someone be like, you shouldn't just put flax seeds in there because they just run through you.
Yes.
Like you should ground them up.
Ground flax seeds.
See?
Yes. I mean,
I know
and again,
things.
you could put them in there unground.
It's like corn. It's useless.
Yeah.
Goes right through you.
You wouldn't get the benefits. It would still act as a fiber, like unground. But when you grind it, then you would get the healthy fats out of it and the lignans, which are good for estrogen levels and things like that. So
get your ground flax from Costco.
Yeah, they've got a good bag there too.
Nick grinds his own. Nick, my husband, grinds it in a coffee grinder.
Now I will say, if we're talking about optimal, that is the most optimal as far as not the fats will degrade or become rancid if they are ground too early or we're not taking care of them. Yeah.
Nick,
don't they need to be in the fridge too to probably keep longevity?
Yeah. Nick does like muffins every week for our kids, and he'll grind just the flax he needs for the muffins because he's like, you lose all the nutrients otherwise. And I'm like,
love it. He knows.
I'm like eating my seeds. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah, that's not doing anything for you.
Yeah.
All my rancid seeds. Mold.
Yeah, and that's a real thing that can happen. So I mean, ideally, if a person can grind them, and that's what I've had patients ask that, and I'm like, realistically, if that's not something that you're going to do, I'm worried more about consistency. Yeah, buy them ground, throw them in the freezer.
Yeah, but I think this is things people don't know.
Yeah,
is they're buying flax seeds from Costco, putting it in their smoothie, and they're like, why can't I take a poop? And it's like, well, we're not really, we're there, but not quite.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So fiber.
Water. Your microbiome. So again, like making sure there's enough healthy bacteria in there. They regulate motility throughout the gut as well.
Ever dreamt of waking up with lashes that are flawless and brows on point without lifting a finger? Well, Glam Lash Studio is here to make that dream a reality. If you're all about saving time in the morning while still looking absolutely stunning, this is for you. lash extensions, brow laminations and waxes, keratin-infused lash lifts and tints. The dream team for an effortlessly stunning look. Emphasis on effortless. So here's the deal. Their lash extensions bring the drama, giving your eyes that extra pop. I used to have lash extensions and I absolutely loved how it looked. Brow laminations, it's like magic for your brows, giving them that Insta-worthy fluffiness. I recently had one of these and highly, highly recommend. And let's not forget about their lash lifts and tints, the not-so-secret weapon for a low-key, high-key, gorgeous look. Say goodbye to the morning makeup struggle and hello to routine as easy as hitting snooze. Your future self will thank you, trust me. Book in today at Glam Lash Studio and let their team of extensively trained and qualified staff do the rest. Her listeners are getting a special code to receive a discount on their next visit. Use code HER10 when booking in with the amazing staff at Glam Lash Studio. We're all about making our mornings easier, and we're doing that with Glam Lash Studio. Don't forget to use the code HER10 to save when booking. It's time to amp up those lashes and brows because life's too short for dull eyes and you deserve to shine. Don't forget to use code HER10 when booking and connect with them at glamlashstudio.yxe.
If you are on the market to buy or sell a home, or maybe both, and want to make the process as stress-free and smooth as possible, then I have the realtor for you. Lacey Cozette is an award-winning Saskatoon realtor who prides herself in being your one-stop shop for both buying and selling. And her passion for her work just shines through when you meet her. Lacey has over 12 years experience in the real estate industry, a 98% list to sale ratio, and she prioritizes an extensive and personalized marketing strategy for each of her clients. Because we all know that the best strategy is more important than ever now. Along with her husband and partner, Kyle Berneski, Lacey is licensed in residential, commercial, and farm. So she literally has you covered no matter what real estate area you need. And because she's built such solid connections in the industry, she can dial up the best lawyers, mortgage brokers, appraisers, and contractors for you too. Lacey has also given us an exclusive discount code for the Her community. You can use the code LACY5 to save $500 off one real estate transaction. You guys, that's huge. So if you want a driven, hardworking, and connected agent who'll go above and beyond for you, this is a no-brainer, guys. Get in touch with Lacey. You'll find her at Realty Executive Saskatoon or on socials at Lacey Cozette. That's at LACEYCOSSETTE. And online at lacycozette.com. And remember to mention the code LACY5 to save $500 on one real estate transaction. We're linking all her info in the show notes for you. So it's like probiotics, like healthy foods.
Yeah, you could take probiotics. I don't think, and again, I'm one of those people that I don't think everybody needs to just take all the things just because the things can be healthy. Let's look at your diet first and have a real conversation. Is switching up your diet right now something that's realistic? Mm-hmm. If it's not, then we might look more heavily at supplements, get you into a place. Because I think a lot of the time when women come in, they're so exhausted. They're tired of feeling like crap and they just want to start feeling better. But right now they don't feel motivated to, say, do all the cooking and the prepping. So we get them feeling better. We might start more with supplements. So that's where a probiotic might be a little bit more handy. Also, depending on bowel symptoms, that can be a little bit more handy to start with. But outside of that, fermented foods. Yeah. So sauerkraut, kimchi, even pickles. Although what I will say about pickles, like when you look at the ingredients, you want to make sure that they're actually pickled like with just salt, like no vinegar, because that kills off the bacteria. Probably would have to look somewhere
and fermented pickles are different.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Nick bought fermented pickles from Calories.
Yeah, okay.
They were not my favorite thing. Yeah. But he did buy them and I did try them.
Yeah.
They tasted fizzy.
Yeah. So they will be a different taste.
Yeah. I literally was like,
none of this.
He's like, eat this. Because I had been seeing a naturopath and he's like, here, fermented foods. And I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
We gotta warm up the palate.
Stop grinding on my flax and giving me some pickles.
He's like, I'm just trying to make you better. And you're just like, no, I want my poop to be reabsorbed.
So, and then, of course, like yogurts. Whether, now again, I'll say dairy. A lot of people have issues with dairy, so I don't always just give just dairy yogurt as an option, but you can get coconut yogurt. Less in protein, so usually I say if you're having that as a snack, to add some nuts and seeds to increase the protein. But yeah, coconut yogurt can be nice too for getting those healthy bacteria in place.
That was very helpful.
Yeah.
That was very helpful and very tangible. Okay, now I want to swing back to, we sort of talked a little bit about estrogen.
Yeah.
What happens when our progesterone is off?
Yeah, so typically with that, it's more of low levels that I see rather than high levels. Progesterone, I don't often see progesterone low on its own. Usually if progesterone is low, I'm also seeing signs of estrogen dominance as well. And that's because progesterone actually reduces the amount of estrogen receptors in the uterus. So if progesterone's in a healthy place, it helps to modulate estrogen stimulation.
Right.
So if we get a drop in progesterone, not only do we get low progesterone symptoms, but we have estrogen thriving more than we might want.
Okay.
So low progesterone, that would be more specific to that, could be constipation. So that's something that can slow down motility if we don't have enough. It could be a low mood. So progesterone stimulates or increases GABA activity in the brain. So GABA is a calming neurotransmitter. Think about it like patients who have seizures are often put on a medication called gabapentin to slow down activity in the brain. So if you don't have enough GABA or progesterone drops, we might see more anxiety. What else would I see with low progesterone? Longer periods. So greater than 34 days, heading towards 36 days. Spotting before the period.
36-day period?
Yeah, or not period, cycle. Thank you
gosh.
for, yeah. Which
was
that
literally
can happen too.
What I was thinking,
More
that's
rare.
concerning.
And it would be. 36-day cycles.
Yeah.
So longer cycles.
With
sometimes
lots of blood, or does it matter?
could go either way.
Okay.
I also will see often spotting, and especially spotting before the period. Now, I'd have to look into if they've done research to actually confirm this. So what I'm about to say is what I see more clinically. But when I see low levels of progesterone, I often see spotting before the period. And I'm not just talking about half a day. I'm talking about like sometimes 2, 3, 4 days, sometimes up to a week of spotting. And kind of what this is telling me is that you're not having a strong progesterone withdrawal to onset a period. So, for example, if you have high levels of progesterone or optimal levels of progesterone and it drops off, that's a strong signal to the body like, okay, we're doing this, we're having a period. But if we have low levels of progesterone and it drops off, it's not as strong of a signal. So I think it takes the body some time to realize like, okay, are we doing this? What's happening? And then eventually realize, okay, I think progesterone's gone. We're going to have a period now. So that's where we see the
And will
spotting.
the period still be like 5 to 7 days?
After the spotting, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So those are more of the progesterone, the low progesterone type symptoms that I see.
So then circling all the way back to the beginning, I like how you said when I was like, how do we balance our hormones? You're like, it's more like, how do we optimize our hormones?
Because I think even the word balance, like in my head, I'm like,
Which we hate.
all the time.
Yeah.
They must be the same. And you're saying, no, there's actually a time for high and low.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I like
and
this.
so and just making sure that, again, when somebody comes in and they say they want to balance hormones, or even if sometimes I'll use that term loosely in practice as well, it just means that I'm wanting to make sure is that estrogen is within a healthy range, progesterone's within a healthy range so that they can do what they need to do when they need to do it.
So question, are you seeing a lot of women that don't have optimized hormones in our day and age right now?
Yes, and I think, I'd be a little bit biased because a huge part of my practice
that's why
is
they come
focused
in.
that way.
Yes.
So yes, I do.
Yes.
And I think what I find too is a lot's been normalized because it's common, but it's not necessarily healthy or optimal.
Tell us some of those things.
So yeah, the symptoms that we talked about with estrogen dominance and progesterone, it being on the lower side, those would be things that I see. But I think, even when it comes to cramping, and so that would be another thing I'd see with if there's higher levels of estrogen is cramping. And the higher levels of estrogen we have, not necessarily, exactly that. It would be, if you have higher levels of estrogen, we're heading into like, say, endometriosis territory, the cramping becomes more severe. But yeah, a lot of women have just normalized cramping that, okay, it's my period, I'm going to have to take time off work, I'm going to need to take all of this Advil or Tylenol or whichever, and that's just being a woman. And I've actually had patients say that their family doctors have said that this is just being a woman. And here's what I'll differentiate between a symptom and a sign. A sign that you're about to get your period might be some mild discomfort, might be feeling a little achy, might be feeling like, I'd rather just curl up at home and read a book rather than mid-month where we feel a little bit more energized and ready to go out and do all the things. You might have some mild cramping, but nothing that would keep you from going to work, nothing that would require, pain medication or anything like that. Those are signs that we're in a different part of the month. Symptoms are things that, again, it's taking Advil or pharmaceuticals to manage. It's things that are keeping us from going to work or doing the things that we want to do, making it so that we're snapping at our loved ones, certainly feeling a little bit, again, maybe a little more emotional or a little bit more tired, but not able to, engage in our regular bonds with people in a healthy way. That's telling me that there's a little bit more going on.
Okay, that's so good, because I think, like you said, we normalize or have started to normalize things that are not necessarily meant to be normal, right?
Yeah.
And are not optimized.
It doesn't have to be a part of a healthy cycle.
Yes, exactly. So when people are looking to optimize their hormones and they're listening to this and they're like, okay, I think some things may be off here, is it a process of like getting blood work done? What are ways to start looking at, because we have listeners all over the world, but it's like, where do we go to even begin that conversation, and what things are we maybe asking to look for?
So it's going to depend on the severity of symptoms. I mean, first and foremost, I'd say if you're questioning at all, it's always good to go bounce ideas off of a healthcare provider, whether it be your family doctor, whether you're working with a naturopathic doctor. And in fact, I would recommend having both on your healthcare team. And if it requires as well, also a gynecologist, also an OB. It's nice to have more people looking at your health, more education. Everybody brings something different to the table. And at the end of the day, I want my patients to feel like the decisions they're making are informed and the best for them, and not just because that's the only advice they got.
How long on average is it taking to optimize them? It's probably very dependent, but I'm like, someone listening, they're like, oh my gosh, like, is this going to take, is it possible? How, almost like, what's the scope? Like, what's the work involved?
Yeah. So again, different if you have underlying conditions for sure. Different due to your history and your lifestyle. It can happen as quickly as within that month. It also is going to depend on what you're willing to do. I have some patients that are coming, they're like, yep, like, let's do all the things. I'm changing my diet. We'll do the supplements. We'll throw everything at it. And typically we'll see movement quicker. Other patients come in and, we lay out, okay, this is everything that can be done. And it's quite overwhelming. And there's zero judgment in that. We all have busy lives. Sometimes it's just not realistic to do all the things. So then we look at, okay, let's just start with a couple of things and each month we'll build on it. That's going to take a little bit longer. But it can happen quite quickly. Again, if a person is willing to change diet and then add supplements in it as well to kind of push the needle quicker.
Okay.
Is there anything physically we can be doing during our cycle to help? Like, I think about, we obviously know, okay, like maybe during our cycle, we need to be like eating this, or we know that our estrogen is high. Is there anything we can be doing or not doing during our cycle to help our hormones?
Yes. So lots. I mean, if we want to talk about diet, like a Mediterranean style diet is one of the best studied diets, I think, for all health in general, but hormones especially, whether it be fertility, pregnancy, hormones, just optimizing hormones, a Mediterranean style diet. And this is because it's higher in the healthy fats. Fat is needed to make hormones. So when I see somebody on a low-fat diet, and I would say our generation is probably better with that, but a low-fat diet, I often see lower production of all hormones. Cholesterol is important for hormone production as well. Cholesterol is not just this bad thing that leads to cardiovascular issues. It's actually needed to make hormones.
See, my eggs are doing something good.
Eggs are doing something
Thank
good.
you very much.
Yes.
Back off.
Exactly.
My egg consumption. Maybe not helping my acne, but it's helping my hormones.
So getting in the healthy fats. They have lots of fiber, lots of antioxidant-rich fruits and vegetables. Those antioxidants help keep inflammation at bay, which again, things like endometriosis, even just higher levels of estrogen and more cramping can be due to more inflammation in the body as well. So yes, a Mediterranean style diet. In fact, one study I looked at showed there was a 40%, which is a pretty big number, 40% reduction in estrogen in women that had adopted a Mediterranean style diet for 6 months.
Wow.
So that's just changing your diet. You know what I mean? That's not.
And the Mediterranean diet's like not hard to follow.
And it's enjoyable.
Like, I feel like it's like pretty decent.
Yeah.
Right?
It's just a lot of whole foods.
It's just whole foods, basically. Basically less packaged foods.
Yeah.
Lower amounts of sugar.
Yeah.
Not a lot of trans fats. Not a lot of red meat. Like red meat once a week, maybe.
Ooh, side tangent. Is sugar affecting our hormones?
Absolutely.
Go off.
So there's many
Just
ways.
for a second.
There's many ways that sugar can affect hormones. One is that sugar will disrupt the microbiome. So it's food, depending on what kind of foods you eat, will depend on what kind of bacteria thrive. So if you're eating a lot of sugar, those bacteria that use sugar for food are going to be the ones that thrive. And they're not the same bacteria that have the healthy benefits that we want. 2, sugar causes a lot of inflammation. So the more inflammation we have, think about it this way. When we're shedding a uterine lining for a period, it's a very inflammatory process. It needs to be in order to get rid of the uterine lining. But if we already have a lot of inflammation going on in the body, then we go into this inflammatory process. Now our cramps are more severe. Maybe we get an acne flare because, again,
Is this also like we'll see more bloating?
See more bloating.
Interesting.
Yeah, so those would be the main ways. And again, it depends kind of how much sugar are you having.
Which is like such a...
Because you crave
when
sugar.
you want sugar when you're on your period.
And so a theory why that is because as estrogen and progesterone drop, so I talked about progesterone with GABA, but estrogen is actually important for serotonin and dopamine production.
Okay.
So those are our focus, our happiness. Like the main target for anti-anxiety, antidepressant medications is an SSRI, so serotonin. As estrogen and progesterone drop off, you're coming into your period, serotonin, dopamine, GABA all drop off. And the things that can increase it quickly, sugar. So we crave sugar, we crave carbs to try and help ourselves feel a little bit better.
So it's actually not like a stupid girl thing.
Not a stupid girl thing. It's a physiology thing.
This
physically
I'm
craving
supposed to have sugar right now. But are there ways to have sugar
in a healthy way
that also support our microbiome?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and again, this is where I meet my patients where they're at. If a person, I have some patients where it's like, okay, dark chocolate, they're having it, they don't want to cut it out. How can we do it in a more optimal way? What I'll say is if you're going to have higher amounts of dark chocolate during this time, and there's nothing wrong with dark chocolate, but if there's a lot of sugar consumption as well, what I'll say is just have a handful of almonds or cashews or some sort of healthy fat or protein with it to stabilize blood sugars during that time.
It's like the glucose goddess.
The glucose. Yeah.
It's like you can eat anything, but the order that you eat it is like really important.
Absolutely.
And how it affects you.
Exactly.
Also, you started off hot with like people eating dark chocolate. I'm like, oh friend, people are not eating dark chocolate. They are eating like McFlurries, Blizzards.
Okay.
They're going to get their mini donuts. I'm like, I thought she was going to be like, someone wants to eat that treat. She's like, you're starting with the healthiest treat I can imagine.
So then let's move over to McFlurry.
We are on very different levels. I'm like eating trifle out of the like bucket.
Okay, so good. We got to hit them all.
And again, I would have to, looking at a patient's diet, there's ways that we can optimize that. I don't often ever say you're not allowed to do this at all. It's more of that, how can we do this in a more balanced way? So if you're having buckets of ice cream before your period, I've got questions about what you're doing earlier in the day. Like, did you have breakfast? How much protein did you have? By the time you got to that ice cream, was it that you had a Tim's coffee and a muffin for lunch, and that's basically all that's been eaten at that point in the day because you're really busy? Now, again, that doesn't mean I fully support women who are busy and having to adapt to things, and some days that just is what it is. But if our goal is to optimize hormones and, reduce those types of symptoms, we might look at, okay, let's get some breakfast in there. Let's get a more solid lunch. Ideally supper as well.
Cravings?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, because now not only are you're trying to satisfy that craving, but you're also satisfying the calorie deficit from the rest of the day. So let's get you into a place where you've got the nutrients that you need and your body's satisfied in that respect. And then if you want something a little sweet, maybe you'll just have the small McFlurry.
the little treat one, the little treat blizzard one. Now that's like this big.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's good. And I know, like, for me, a thing I've implemented is like when I want a treat, I'm now like having a piece of dark chocolate. Right? I'm not reaching necessarily for always, but I just had to laugh.
But there's there's so many people listening who are like,
it's not the dark chocolate. And there's nothing wrong with McFlurry. I will go have a McFlurry. Yeah. Like, I also eat pizza. I think that's also a misconception about me and my career that I don't indulge in these things. I do.
Yeah.
But I make sure that, again, ideally, the rest of the day that I've gotten what I need in so that it's satisfying just that enjoyment piece and not also like the nutrition piece. So I fully support balance. Balance is possible. But
I like that. I think that's a good takeaway is, are we, like, what is this actually satisfying, or what is this actually doing? Yeah. Because if we're using it to indulge in a treat, that's totally fine. Great. But if it's because we haven't eaten all day, and so now we're probably eating more of it, and I think the other thing is, like, we can sit here all day and be like, everyone can do what they want. But I'm like, if someone's coming to a naturopath because they're like, I'm having problems, it is your job to be like, okay, I am going to point out where I'm seeing maybe something we need to work on, right? Yeah, exactly. No, I think that's totally fair.
Okay, I'm going to circle back all the way back now. We were asking what things we can do to optimize our hormones, and we had gotten off on lots of tangents on diet.
Yeah.
What else?
Diet. Okay, so outside of that, let's talk about stress.
Yes, that's what good.
Yes.
Okay.
Stress.
Please.
So when we're stressed, the adrenal glands release something called cortisol. I think we know it as our stress hormone.
CJ just took
I tried to not do it into the mic. As soon as I hear it, I'm just like,
oh,
breathe. But there's lots we can do to work with it too, so don't get too overwhelmed. So the adrenal glands release cortisol.
Just reminding my body to breathe. Take it easy.
Breathing helps too.
Yeah.
Release cortisol when we're stressed. If we have too much cortisol for too long, cortisol will suppress. This is why I brought in all the different types of hormones, but it will suppress that gonadotropin releasing hormone in the hypothalamus, which downregulates everything along the way.
I think you just need to say brain.
In the brain. In the brain. So it suppresses the hormone in the brain that stops estrogen and progesterone, reduces it.
Okay.
So again, if you have a high stress job, or I'll see patients where they maybe went through a traumatic situation and cortisol levels have remained high, now we might be skipping periods, or again, we start getting symptoms from suboptimal periods or cycles. So this is where, again, taking a look at our stress levels and what we can do to work with them. I think on a recent podcast, Dr. Amy Morris, was. Yeah. So I liked one piece that she said about, what did she say? She tells her family that if she doesn't take care of herself, y'all are going down.
Yeah.
That's the way we need to look at it. It's self-care is not selfish, and it's not just for yourself. It's for the community. It's so you can show up as a mom, as a friend, as a daughter, as a coworker, whichever way you need to show up. It makes it so that you can actually show up in the way that you need to show up. So whether that be for you journaling or yoga, meditation, simply working out, getting together with friends, like whatever it is for you that you need to do to keep your stress levels in check. Counseling. I'm a big fan of counseling. Family and friends are great, but sometimes it's nice to have that third party that's completely unbiased to bounce ideas off of and help you look at something in a different way. Again, family and friends, they know you well, and I think they bring something to the table too, but sometimes what family and friends want for us isn't necessarily always what's best for us. So it's nice to get that extra opinion too.
Can you tell me what someone who has high cortisol, what a period would look like for them? And then also, like, what does it look like for them hormonally, or like what are we seeing in their moods? What are we seeing in, I don't know,
other
like,
symptoms as well.
in other symptoms.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming like your cortisol goes high.
Yeah.
So you're in stress.
Yes.
I'm guessing your sex hormones, right? Like even your sex drive is going down.
Yeah, sex drive is definitely down at that time.
Yeah.
The body is not thinking that this is a great time to engage in sex and also to have a child. You're really stressed. So it's going to downregulate that. And depending on how stressed and how long you're stressed and how high the cortisol is, you might stop having a period altogether.
Wow.
So I'll actually call this the female athletic triad, because often we see it with women who are competing or athletes at higher levels. Because they're competing and training so hard, they might not be nourishing enough. And even if they're trying to, it's really hard to maintain enough nourishment for that level of training. In addition to, because they're training so hard, maybe not getting enough nourishment, they're underweight. All of this is very stressful to the body. And so we'll often see that they miss their periods.
Hey everybody, it's Erica. You guys know I love a quality handbag, and I recently found a luxury resale company that I have to share with you. Working Girls Boutique offers a stunning selection of gently loved luxury handbags and a safe, reliable, and secure way to purchase your dream bag. They have a strong commitment to authenticity and choose carefully curated pieces in excellent condition, which include Prada, YSL, Louis Vuitton, and they have a stunning Chanel collection, which is 100% on my dream list. One thing I love about Working Girls Boutique is how seriously they take making sure each piece is authentic. Ensuring authenticity of luxury items is a serious business, and Working Girls Boutique prides themselves on thoroughly checking every item they choose to the highest degree. They even use AI technology so you can feel super secure about the bags you are investing in. Working Girls Boutique also offers a flexible payment plan so you can secure your dream bag without breaking the bank. Plus, you know, they gave us an exclusive discount code for the Her community, which is amazing. It's code HER50 HER50 to save $50 off your purchase. If you're like me and constantly looking for that next dream bag to add to your closet, you can find all the details on the newest designer additions on their Instagram at Working Girls Boutique, and head to their website wgboutique.com to secure your dream bag. Don't forget to use the code HER50 for $50 off your purchase, and 100% make sure to tag me because I want to see what bag you snagged.
So that's more of exercise. We can skip our periods just from high levels of stress as well. So that would be one symptom, is that you're just simply not getting a period anymore. Not the only thing, like things like PCOS, we skip periods as well, but that's one thing it could be. Other symptoms, yep, go ahead.
Do you think, I just was curious about this, do you think there are some women being diagnosed with PCOS when really it's stress? Or is there, like, I'm going to be totally open. I don't know a ton about PCOS, right? So I'm like, could that be a misconception? Is that maybe someone actually has like really high cortisol?
Yeah.
You know, they're living up here, and then they go in and someone says, I think you have PCOS, blah, 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 when really it's like, if we could mitigate the stress. I don't know.
I would say it's more likely the other way. I would say it's more likely that the doctor or whoever you're working with might say, are you sure you're not just stressed? And especially if they went through something that's stressed.
Okay.
And this is where it kind of perpetuates the it's all in your head situation, because I've had lots of patients say that they've went to their doctor several times looking to understand their hormones because something's just not right. Or maybe they're trying to get pregnant now, and now they're paying more attention. They're like, okay, I'm having trouble getting pregnant. My cycles aren't regular. Something's up. And sometimes it git's played off as, you sure it's not just stress? You know, maybe they already did have a child. They're a busy mom, and so. Yeah, if you do all the tests, it's very unlikely that you would get misdiagnosed with stress if it's PCOS. This is because PCOS, in order to be diagnosed, you need to have two of three things. You need to have polycystic, so it's polycystic ovarian syndrome. So again, there's multiple cysts on the ovaries. Usually I think we're looking at over 12-ish for it to be PCOS. Or you have signs of hyperandrogenism, which means higher levels of testosterone, essentially. So whether you do blood work or you're showing signs would be acne, hair growth on the face, chest, back, nipples, like areas that we typically as women do not have as much hair growth. And then ovulation issues. So you might not be ovulating, you might be skipping periods. So if you were to do the blood work for that, very unlikely that you would
I get it.
think that it was stress.
Yeah.
But I can see that now women are going and they're being told they're stressed, and it's like,
I think there's something else.
There's something else going on.
Yeah.
Right.
So if it is just stress, though, other things that we might see is, so if there's high cortisol, we'll see more weight gain in the abdomen as opposed to other areas. With high cortisol or with adrenal function in general, you can have actual conditions associated with high and low cortisol. Like high cortisol is known as Cushing's syndrome or Cushing's disease. Low would be Addison's. What I'm talking about here is just suboptimal or higher levels of cortisol. I'm not talking into the realm of Cushing's, and I'm not talking as low as Addison's, just something that's maybe suboptimal.
Okay.
But you would have the weight gain in the stomach. You'd be really irritable, very anxious. Sometimes they'll find, like especially in athletes, they're not healing and recovering as quickly because cortisol also plays a role in immune system modulation as well. So those would be some of the things that I would be seeing outside cycles, aside from, perhaps just even not having a period.
Okay. The other thing I want you to touch on, because you mentioned it in sort of our conversation, but I think would be very helpful, anxiety and hormones and the link between it. Can you just shed some light on all of that?
Yeah. I mean, it's going to come back to the cortisol. When we're anxious, it's releasing cortisol as well.
Okay.
So this is kind of just checking in with yourself to see, how anxious am I? I think this is where it's tricky as women, as we tend to take on and play a lot of different roles. And I'll ask my patients, or a lot of my patients, I'm like, what are your anxiety levels like? What are your stress levels like? And I'll see that in their intake, they're rated as like a 3 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10. But when I actually unpack it and I see that, maybe they've got 3 kids and they're running them all to different sports, and their husband works away 2 weeks on, 1 week off kind of thing. And they're, doing all the meal cooking, and they're doing, maybe they've got a sick parent, and they're running me through all this. And I'm like, that sounds like a lot. And they'll say, but like I'm doing it. Like it's, everybody's got what they need to do. The kids get where they need to go, and, I'm good. And I'm like, but that's a lot on the body. Like, even if like mentally we're able to prioritize and accomplish these tasks, the body is interpreting that in a different way, and that's telling me a different story. So while you feel like mentally stress is like a 3 out of 10, your body's telling me it's more of a 7 out of 10. And we need to work at kind of how you're adapting with that. And so, other symptoms that can be made worse by stress as well. One of the first things to go in the body or be utilized is magnesium when we're stressed. So magnesium helps to keep things like cortisol, adrenaline, glutamate, which is a excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain. It keeps it all at bay while increasing serotonin and GABA production. So it helps the body self-regulate when we're anxious. But the longer we're anxious, the more magnesium we use up. And unless we're repleting it in good levels or in sufficient levels, we'll become deficient or have suboptimal levels, which can lead to us being more susceptible to stress, and it becomes a bit of a vicious cycle.
Okay.
So magnesium is also helpful for estrogen level modulation as well, how heavy or how strong our cramps are. So it starts to affect other things with the cycle as well.
I was just taking it to sleep.
And sleep.
That's why I was taking it.
Yeah. Well, I think magnesium affects a lot of transmissions.
Yeah.
Not the right word.
Neurotransmitters.
Things that happen in the body, right?
In the brain.
Yeah.
So yes, good for sleep. And we'll talk about sleep also affects hormones, but for magnesium for sleep, because it increases serotonin and GABA, if you have a busy mind and if you're not sleeping due to anxiety, it can be very helpful. In addition to that, when we look at muscle contraction, calcium is its role is muscle contraction and magnesium is the relaxation. So if you have restless legs or having trouble physically calming down, magnesium also hits that. So magnesium can be really nice for sleep.
Tell us more about sleep. I know we've touched on it a little bit, but I think that a lot of us probably
also affects hormones.
Yes, all either struggle with sleep, whether it's like maybe we can touch on having trouble falling asleep, having trouble staying asleep, having trouble getting up, being super tired.
Yep.
Right?
And those all mean different things.
Yeah.
So I'll start with what these things mean. If you're having trouble falling asleep, I'm thinking about cortisol or cortisol levels too high at night. I'm thinking about blood sugar regulation. So if you're somebody that likes to have ice cream, or rice cakes seem to be a popular snack late at night before bed, but more of carb-heavy snacks before bed, this spikes our blood sugar. And then in the middle of the night, blood sugar is going to drop off. And when it drops off, that's stressful to the body and it releases cortisol. Cortisol is also our wake hormone in addition to it being our stress hormone. So now you're getting that spike in the middle of the night, and we're waking in the middle of the night and are restless then now. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about: difficulty falling asleep, difficulty staying asleep. If you wake up super tired, if you're one of those people where enough sleep is never enough sleep, I'm now thinking about low levels of cortisol. So perhaps you went through a stressful period, you were stressed for a very long time. The thought is that perhaps they'll call it like adrenal insufficiency. Meaning that now you might be actually having lower levels of cortisol because the body was putting out such a high level for so long. Now it's trying to conserve. Now it's just low levels, but there's not enough there to wake you up like you want to be in the morning.
Oh.
So, and then when it comes to sleep, so melatonin being our sleep hormone, it can actually, if we don't have enough melatonin, that can also downregulate the neurotransmitter, the hormone in the brain that goes to the ovaries, gonadotropin releasing hormone, GnRH. And so then that will downregulate estrogen and progesterone and throw off our cycles as well. One study showed that women, and this is where it's unfortunate because it was women who got less than 8 hours of sleep, which I think is a lot of us, produced 20% less FSH, which again is stimulating the follicle, stimulating estrogen production.
Right.
So that's just less than 8 hours. And I would say, like I said, I think that's a lot of us. So it doesn't mean that in order to be healthy, we have to have more than 8 hours, but this is where I like to bring attention to it, is that's the power of sleep. And if you have the option to sleep more, prioritize it.
Right. Not trying to be like, it's an easy fix, but it's like one of those things that it's like, if you can, this could really help.
Yeah.
In like I don't want to say easy way, but like
something that's in your or could be in your control.
Like I'm thinking like going and completely overhauling your pantry and your fridge is like, whoa, especially if you have a family.
Yep.
But like maybe being like, okay, can I tack on an extra hour in the morning and at night?
Yep.
Like, go to bed an hour early.
Yep.
Wake up an hour later. Like if you're able to. I get that probably a lot of people you're seeing are like moms who are like, my kid is in my bed at 3 a.m. or like whatever. But I'm like, it feels like something that's like someone could try it. Like if they're sitting here listening right now.
Yeah.
Like it's like, I could try that. I could try even just for right now adding an extra hour.
Yep.
And maybe it's half an hour on each end of my like sleep cycle.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I like that.
And that's the thing too, is it could be that they just don't simply have time. But I also have patients where it takes an hour or two to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so then we'd look at, okay, how can we get you sleeping quicker?
I'm like that. So how can you help me? Because I will lay down and I'll be like, I'm exhausted. I got 5 kids. We own multiple businesses. My life is crazy. And I'll lay down and I'm like, bing. And then everything's going. I mean, I'm ADHD, so there's that too. My brain just like doesn't turn off very, very well. But what would you say if you didn't know I was ADHD? Now that I
or if you did know, because maybe that plays into it.
But like, how would you be like, okay, Erica, like,
Yeah.
we're gonna help you sleep better?
So yes, I'd be looking at cortisol levels. So if, again, I'm getting a sense that you got a busy life and cortisol levels might be higher. So there's things that we can do to help reduce cortisol levels. Like obviously the self-care stuff. This is where it gets into if somebody comes to me and again, they're busy and they don't have time for that. That's when we look at, okay, supplementally, what could we do to kind of get you back into the swing of things? I don't typically recommend people going to get supplements without working with somebody because it might not be indicated. There's things that interact with each other, especially if there's pharmaceuticals. But just to throw one out there in general, like ashwagandha is something that has been shown to help with cortisol levels. And there's many other kinds as well.
I've actually heard of that before.
And I think most people have at this point. So there's other things that can be looked at if we need to. But outside of, using herbs or supplements, magnesium was one of them too that helps to balance cortisol. But coming back to if a person can have, again, a whole foods diet that's rich in things like magnesium to help balance cortisol levels, making sure that your last meal of the day, ideally is supper, but if you have a little snack after, that it's protein rich to balance your blood sugar so that you're not spiking and dipping, causing the release of cortisol at different times. As far as and now it kind of depends, like sleep hygiene, what does that look like? Is somebody on their phone up until whatever hours? We know about the blue light and how that affects melatonin secretion and things like that. So as we head into the evening, making sure that we don't have a bunch of light exposure or blue light that's preventing us from secreting melatonin as well.
How far away are you saying then that we should not be on our phones before sleeping, ideally, based on studies or whatever, or what you recommend?
I mean, if a person can in the hour before, like that's kind of just a general, but it's going to be different for everybody because there's some people that they can literally be on their phone and fall asleep with it in their hand.
Well, and I think I've heard, tell me if you agree with this or not, but I think I've heard like 3-2-1. So like 3 hours before, 3 hours stop eating, 2 hours stop drinking, 1 hour stop electronics.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay.
Yeah, I only remember to drink water at the very end of the day and I'm like, chugging it. And I'm like, why am I up all night? Yeah. You're like, Erica, you don't need supplements. You just stop drinking your water.
We need to transition you to morning.
A morning water drinker.
Yeah.
I'm curious on if you can speak to, because obviously we're talking about like hormones and food and all these things, but also I feel like what I've been really trying to listen to is even like my physical activity during my cycle, because I'm like, I like heard this thing. We had Marie Barker on our podcast and she put together this amazing Know Your Flow thing. So I've been following it this cycle. And it's like, working out can put your body into like stress. And if you're working out like and putting your body into like too high of stress during certain parts of your cycle, like you're just like,
you're doing more harm than good.
You're actually doing harm. So do you ever like talk about any of that with your patients who are coming in?
So it's definitely not. And again, everybody has their own kind of way of approaching things. This is just my approach. I probably wouldn't bring that up unless I felt it was affecting the cycle enough to make a difference. If I got the sense that they were overworking out and undernourishing, then I'll have that conversation of, hey, during these times that we might want to engage in more, depending on what they're doing, engage in more going for walks or yoga or even more weightlifting versus like high intensity or doing your spin classes or something like that. If I don't feel like that is adding too much to the cycle or what's being affected, I usually won't get into it. We'll optimize what I think. It's kind of like, for example, with sugar. If I don't think if they're having, a little bit of dark chocolate here or there, or, they like a little bit of sweetener in their coffee or something like that, probably not going to talk about sugar. But if it's something where they're having really sugary, like pop every day, juice, adding a bunch like the lattes with like extra sugar, like if they're doing a bunch of that every day, now we'll probably talk about sugar. So it kind of depends person to person on how much I think it's affecting things. So I don't have like a blanket statement like this is what you should be doing at these times in the cycle.
That makes sense. The other thing I'm curious on is I think a lot of us are experiencing dip offs in the middle of the day, like either feeling really lethargic, and or hitting like, you know, that 2 to 3, 4 o'clock time period and just like energy really dropping off. The other thing is in Saskatchewan, you don't deal with it, but daylight savings just happened for us in Alberta and the rest of Canada. And, you know, that really can affect, you know, some of those things too. So I'm curious on strategies to help with just like tiredness, lethargy, like, you know, during the day.
First, sometimes, again, depending on the person's overall picture, that could indicate that you're low in cortisol, and we might need to work on that a little bit. Aside from low cortisol, in order to kind of prevent that dip, I'm looking at, okay, what are you doing like dietarily up until that point in the day? I find skipping breakfast is very common for a lot of women, whether it's because they're busy or they're just not hungry or they just don't think it's important. So if we're skipping breakfast and the first meal is lunch, and again, maybe it's not a very protein-rich lunch, you're going to drop off at that point in the day because we just haven't had enough nourishment, number one. And number two, the only meal that you did have, there wasn't a lot of protein to stabilize blood sugar. So we had a spike and then a dip and you crashed. Outside of that, you know, sometimes we can have food sensitivities if there's stuff going on with the gut as well. And there's food sensitivities where when you're consuming certain foods or a certain amount of certain foods, sometimes if it's something that you consumed, like let's take dairy, for example, it's a common one. Let's say that there was, I don't know, some sort of like cereal with dairy milk for breakfast. And then at lunch, they had yogurt with oatmeal or granola or whatever in it. And that was now the second time they ate it. Sometimes I'll see that there's a bit of an energy crash just because now we've consumed higher levels of that food that they happen to be sensitive to, or we find out later they're sensitive to. And that led to more inflammation and just kind of slowing down the overall system.
Because that's what inflammation is doing, is slowing us down.
Essentially, so when there's more, and again, inflammation is going to affect us in so many different ways, but let's talk about it in the sense of like insulin and blood sugar levels. So when we have more inflammation, that's going to make our cells less responsive to insulin in order to utilize glucose. So higher levels of inflammation makes it so that we need higher levels of insulin in order to actually drive glucose into the cell. When we have higher levels of insulin, we have the ovaries, when they're exposed to higher levels of insulin, often output more testosterone. When we have higher levels of testosterone, that's when we see our hormonal acne. That's when we tend to see, that's kind of the character of PCOS. That's when we see issues with ovulation, fertility, you name it, when it comes to throwing cycles off as far as insulin and testosterone. So yes, inflammation is important to keep in mind as far as whether it be food sensitivities, sugar. It can cause issues with the cycle.
Well, is inflammation what's basically causing aging?
It can. Right? It can speed up aging, yes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how do I stop it?
So, and that's the thing, like Mediterranean diet is a very, like it's considered.
Just Erica's face, just zoom. We just need a slow. Okay, question.
Yeah.
That just popped in. Like having a coffee when you have a cortisol, you know, like dip in the day, is that helping or hindering?
So.
And what would help or hinder more or better?
Oh, yeah.
If you're having that coffee later in the day and it's affecting your sleep, I would say now the cons are outweighing the pros. If you're having coffee, and I think what they're looking at now is the optimal time is somewhere around 10 or 11 in the morning.
I drink decaf in the morning. This is my husband again. Okay, my husband like researches.
Dialed in.
Nick is like my researcher.
I love
Nick
it.
is like, I'm like, I'm tired in the afternoons. And like 2 days later, he comes and he's like, here's what I learned.
Aww.
I listened to this and this and this. And so I drink decaf in the morning, which I know is still like a little bit of caffeine, but I drink my coffee. I've even pushed it sometimes to like noon.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I have found the dip is better.
Yeah.
Like it's happening more at feel like a reasonable time, like in the evening, like when I like need to be coming down.
Yeah.
So this is the one thing I'm doing.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, it kind of depends when you're having it. Is it affecting your sleep? Again, I would take a step back and look at, okay, why are cortisol levels dropping before, you know, just kind of using something to make up for it. But coffee is fine.
What could we be swapping out in the afternoon?
For instead of coffee?
Yeah.
So breakfast and lunch got to be there. And like, they don't need to be in huge quantities because I know some women struggle to eat a lot in the morning, but just like some sort of protein-rich meal to start the day off with, balancing your blood sugar. What else could we do midday? Water. I know that sounds so trivial, but water, even a mild amount of dehydration has been shown to increase headaches, reduce focus.
Is this where we could have our electrolytes? In the afternoon?
I wouldn't even say it. Unless you're sweating a lot, I wouldn't even say go there. Or if you have serially low blood pressure, that maybe it would help to have a little bit of sodium to help bring it up. But outside of that, if you're not working out, I would say just use a squeeze of lemon or something like that.
Okay.
To in your water. But yeah, increasing water, making sure you're having adequate water. Certainly you could do teas or things like that, but I don't even mind coffee later in the day. It's just as long as it's not affecting your sleep. That would be my big thing.
Awesome. Well, this has been such a helpful conversation.
I really
I feel like thank you for allowing us to interject and bring it down to sort of our non-scientific level, but bringing the expertise behind it. I think you gave us such good tips that we can walk away with and that our audience will really be able to learn from. We have a question that we ask our guests at the end of every episode, and it can be health related if you want to, and it doesn't have to be at all. But we like to ask, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given or like to give?
Yeah. The best piece of advice that I've been given, and I also like to give, and my mom actually said it, and it's to learn to dance in the rain. And that's, I think that there's a lot of ups and downs in life, and I find that often we keep waiting until, you're done the workday or the weekend, or once this month is done, or whichever, and we life goes by and we don't enjoy those moments. And I think that just learning to make the best of any situation and learn and grow and find the happiness is the key to an overall happy life.
I really like that. I think that's even good with what you're talking about. Like, I think you're probably having a lot of people coming in with health stuff and they're waiting and they're waiting for this and they're waiting to feel better for that. And there's time and place for that, but there's also time to go, it's okay to like enjoy life while we're working on these things as well. Like you can actually do both at the same time. Yeah. No, this was really great. I really appreciate you coming all the way out here and sharing all your knowledge with us.
Yes. Where can everyone find you? And for people that are Saskatoon local, where can they work with you? All of those good things.
So currently I'm working at Saskatoon Naturopathic Medicine. It's located in Stonebridge. You can find the link to that on my Instagram. So that's Dr. Brittany Pearce. That's, I guess the two would be where you would be able to find me.
Amazing. We'll put all of that in our show notes, but definitely you have some really great information on your social page as well. So if people are looking to even connect there, I think that's a really good spot to go.
Thanks.
Yeah. So thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us on this episode of the Her Podcast. If you want to follow along with us, you can find us on Instagram and TikTok at its.her.podcast. We can't wait to see you there.